What's popping, Fire Emblem players? This is Chapter 30 of my Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard Mode 0% Gross playthrough, presented by yours truly, Don9151. I'm going solo on commentary, which goes along with the feel of what this game wants Hector to do for plot-related reasons, and this chapter is notorious for how stingy it is with its deployment slots. On Hector Hard Mode, you can only deploy one unit in addition to Hector, which is a callback to the first chapter of this campaign. Although this map is a little bit more complicated than that, and because of that, there are two things that factor into how we prepare for this chapter, which are whom to deploy with Hector, and who should receive the boots. The objective of this chapter is for Hector to claim a space, which is just a fancy way to say seize, because as expected, the space that Hector needs to claim is also occupied by a very bulky boss. So not only do we care about getting Hector to that objective as fast as possible, but we also need to make sure that once Hector is there and ready to end the chapter, that we're not left hanging with no way to kill the boss. So if you're aiming for a low turn count, I find that there are three general ways to approach this chapter. The first way is to deploy a warp user alongside Hector. This warp user ought to be a druid, a sage, or a valkyrie with a near max magic stat and with the boots if you want to get the lowest possible turn count. The way the strategy works is on turn 1, Hector moves left as far as possible, and then the warp user warps Hector to the edge of their next turn's movement range. Then on turn 2, before Hector moves, the warp user warps Hector all the way to the left as far as possible across the wall that's in the way, and this should allow Hector to start engaging the boss on turn 2 player phase, which gives him 2 rounds of combat to secure the kill for turn 3 completion. This strategy is preferred for growth LTCs, but obviously in 0% growths, not only do we not have a staff user with enough warp range, but also there's no way that Hector's going to be able to defeat the boss in one-on-one combat. The second way to approach this chapter is to carry Hector to the objective with a boots flyer, specifically Heath or Florina, because those are the only 2 flyers in this game that have a low enough constitution to be able to rescue a promoted Hector when they themselves are promoted. In 0% gross, Florina is obviously not a viable candidate due to her stats being so bad, but even though Heath's stats are better, he has significant trouble too, because he's not OP enough to be able to fly through most of this chapter unscathed against generic enemies, and once he reaches the boss, he faces a huge roadblock, because this boss doubles and 1-rounds Heath at base. He requires investment into his speed just to avoid being doubled with some weaponry that doesn't weigh him down, and not only that, he needs to rig at least 2 criticals to be able to defeat the boss in the lowest possible turn count, which is 5. Laponia ended up investing significantly in Heath for this strategy in his playthrough, and he finished this chapter in 6 turns this way because of the limitations that we just described. The final way to approach this map is a brute force method, which is what we're doing here by giving Hector the boots and having him race across the map as fast as his stubby legs will allow him to. We need to pair him with someone who can both keep up and clear the way ahead of him so that he's not obstructed, and the best candidate for that is Vita. We already pointed out that she's absurdly strong, and she takes no damage from any of the physical enemies in this chapter. This would be a great chance for her to train up her lance rank, but instead we gave her a killing edge because this is also a great opportunity to wear down the killing edge and set it up for low uses in a later chapter. One of Vita's drawbacks is that she's not very fast, and because of the way that she had to move to clear Hector's path, she only gets 1 round to face against the boss, which means that we have to rig a low percent Bravesword critical, but this is still the most reliable strategy, and is helped by the fact that this boss has 0 luck. Before I wrap things up in 6 turns, I should point out that this chapter features some stealable items, like a Speedwings and the Goddess icon, that entice a player into deploying a thief alongside Hector instead of someone useful. Keep in mind that it has to be a thief because assassins can't steal items in this game. This is a trap, and you shouldn't do this unless your Hector is really good and can handle the boss on his own. That's it for Chapter 30. See you all later.